Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Jessica, and I want to be introducing Kathy Boatwright, who's going to go over what to expect when you're expecting a virtual compliance review. If you have any questions, you can put them into the chat or the question activity Q&A app, or email them, however you want to get a question through.
All right, thanks, Jessica. And I'm fully aware that I am what's standing between you and your lunch. And for those who may have seen in the chat earlier today when Amanda asked what you would be doing if you weren't doing your job, I responded that I would be a lady who lunches. So I'm very cognizant that it's lunchtime. And so I will try to go through this as quickly as possible. But if I do end up going too fast, someone please say so in the chat and we can slow it down. So I want to make sure that everyone gets to hear all the material. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to start by taking a poll, and I'm interested to know how many people have completed a virtual compliance review with DHCD before. And you can pop your answers into the chat box, or you can raise your hand. I see Charlie raised his hand. Okay, I see a good mix of yeses and nos in the chat box, so that's good. That's good. Now, Rebecca, more than one. Rebecca's probably tired of compliance reviews with me. Okay, so we've got a good mix of folks who have experienced the compliance reviews and will know some of the information I'm going to share, and then this will be new information for some. So my next question is, what is your preference for compliance reviews, in person or virtual? Right now, DHCD is continuing with our virtual compliance reviews, but we will take your feedback and consider it as we make decisions about future compliance reviews. All right, I got one in person in there, either, lots of virtuals. Okay, we got a lot of virtuals in there. You don't want to see us face to face? I kid. So a lot of virtuals. Okay, good deal. Okay, well, thank you for your feedback on that. We will don't want to travel. Oh, I miss it. I miss traveling. Okay, well, thank you for this feedback. We will consider it as we make our decisions moving forward on compliance reviews. Next slide, please. So for this presentation, the plan is to discuss what happens before the virtual compliance review, what's going to happen during the virtual compliance review, what will happen after the virtual compliance review, and then recommendations and reminders for you as you are moving forward in preparation for your compliance review. Next slide, please. So before the compliance review, you will be contacted by your community development specialist to schedule the compliance review. And typically this scheduling happens informally through email, and it will be between the grant manager, the grantee, an elected official, or the chief administrative official, and the financial manager, and any other partners who are relevant to the compliance review itself. And this will typically get scheduled between 12 to 14 months after you have signed your contract with DHCD. In 2021, some of you may have noticed that we scheduled those compliance reviews a little bit earlier than we usually have in the past. It's because we want to go ahead and get those on your calendar in the hopes that you will already start preparing your files for a compliance review rather than waiting until right before the compliance review to have your documentation ready. So after the date has been set, we will follow up with a formal letter, and we call that the Here We Come letter. And this would be Here We Come in person, but we're not doing that right now. So it's a virtual Here We Come. And in this letter, it will outline the dates of the compliance review. Right now, where we are doing virtual compliance reviews, we are typically scheduling at least 2 days to cover those materials. And we will request when you send those documents to us. And most of the time, it's by close of business the day before the compliance review, but your community development specialist does have some flexibility on when they request that you send those documents. But it will need to be in their inbox or Google Drive before the compliance review starts. And that will lead into the next bullet on my slide, which is the compliance document checklist. Your CDS will send a compliance document checklist outlining all of the files that you will need to provide to them before the compliance review. And this is a perk for those on the other side because we are telling you exactly what we need to see. So you don't have to do the guesswork. You don't have to send us everything you have because you probably have already either uploaded some of those documents into CAMS or you have sent those to your community development specialist. So it's basically a really great open book test for you because we will tell you what we need to see. Your CDS will also tell you how they prefer to receive those files. Some of them might prefer that you email those files. Some might request that you do a Dropbox link or a Google Drive link, or in some cases, you can send all of your documents on a flash drive to your CDS, which that has happened to me on a virtual compliance review. But whichever way you send the files, you will sort that out with your community development specialist prior to sending those documents. Okay, next slide. Okay, so before and during the compliance review, you will likely receive a lot of emails. And these emails will be telling you reminders of when the compliance review will be and reminders of this is the documentation that I need. And throughout the compliance review, your CDS will set the tone for how they want to communicate with you. Your CDS will send a Google Meet for your calendar so you can hold that space so that you could meet virtually like we're doing here today. But it's possible that your CDS might just hold that space and not need to reach out to you in this Google Meet space because you're going to be great and you're going to send them all the files they need. They're not going to have any questions. They won't need to see you face to face. So that is a perk of a virtual compliance review because you as the grant manager or the grantee do not have to sit in front of the CDS while they're reviewing all of the files and staring at them, just sweating it out, making sure that everything is there. You have the flexibility to work on other things and answer other emails while your CDS is reviewing the documents. But your CDS will tell you, hey, I need you to hop on the Google Meet in 15 minutes. I have a question. Or your CDS might say, hey, I'm going to call you in 5 minutes. I want to talk through something. So the grant manager and financial manager at a minimum must be available the entire days of the review. Next slide. Okay, so during the compliance review, your CDS will be looking at all of the documents that you have provided and those that they have already received. And this will take a little bit longer on the side of the CDS because it's a lot of virtual information. And so there's a lot of toggling back and forth between screens. So please be patient. It might take us some time to get that information. Let's see, I want to highlight some other things. A tip here, do not provide documentation unless your CDS asks you to provide documentation. Sometimes we get more information that we need and it takes us longer to sort through it. And sometimes it's information that, while helpful, is not necessarily something that we need to review at the compliance review. And another tip for when you're sending your documents, please provide them to your community development specialist in the order that they are listed in the compliance document checklist. The CDS will complete the post-contract compliance checklist, and on that checklist, the document checklist that we send, it lists the order of the documents and by the checklist that your CDS will have to review. And I see in the chat that Angela has her hand up. Angela, would you like to ask a question? You're welcome to unmute or type it in the chat box.
No, I think my cursor was just over the hand. Sorry.
She's just so excited for compliance reviews. She's just raising the virtual roof, if you will, over some compliance reviews. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the compliance review will include an entire documentation review of everything that has been done up to that point. Okay, and for virtual inspections, we are still not in a space where we are going out into the field to do virtual inspections for housing rehab projects. So each housing rehab project, the CDS will work with the grant manager and the rehab specialist and the property owner to make the appropriate arrangement so that we can document a virtual inspection. And that could be held through Google Meet or FaceTime if the internet capability is there and the tech skills are there for all parties involved. And if that's not an option, we will do photos or perhaps videos of the before and after. And we will also schedule a phone interview or perhaps a video interview if the capability is there with the homeowner, and we have a list of questions that we will ask about their experience participating in the housing rehab program. And for those who have facade programs, we still will review 25% of the facades improved, and we will review 25% of the housing rehab client files. Now, those files typically contain more sensitive information, so we do ask that you do not send those through email, and most likely your CDS will ask you to join Google Meet if you have a housing rehab project and show the files, like take your page and just show it up to the screen so that your CDS can at least see that the information is there and that the forms are filled out completely and they are signed by the appropriate folks. Okay, next slide. Okay, so after the virtual compliance review, there will be a virtual debrief. I don't know if anybody is a Scandal fan, but I am, and I consider all of y'all gladiators. You're out there doing good. So that's where I am with this meme here. So you're doing the good work, and this recap is the virtual debrief, and your CDS will ask you to join them on the Google Meet, and they will explain everything that was uncovered, if you will, during the compliance review. And ideally, this virtual debrief gets scheduled on one of the 2 days for the compliance review. However, we understand sometimes with elected officials and chief admin officials, their schedules might not allow for them to meet on the same day. So this will get scheduled where they can be in attendance. And the virtual debrief will outline, like I said, everything that came up during the compliance review, any of the findings, concerns, unresolved issues, because we don't want you to get the letter of findings and be surprised. We want to put it all out there now. That way everybody is on board. And you can also go ahead and consider it like your task orders. You're going ahead and starting to pull together the information that you need to address everything from the compliance review. And the letter of findings, we typically try to get that out to you within 30 days of the compliance review. And this will be the formal letter documenting everything that came up in the compliance review, and it will outline the corrective actions to address everything that was found. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. If you thought you weren't going to get rickrolled today, you were wrong, because I rickrolled you, but I did it because I love you. So after the virtual compliance review, you'll have to work through the findings, concerns, or unresolved issues and address those with corrective actions. And a finding is when the CDS cannot document compliance with a program policy or federal regulation. An example of this could be that there is no documentation of weekly payroll reviews to verify that you have met a federal labor standards requirement, or if those payrolls do not have original signatures. It could also be that there's not enough sufficient documentation or no documentation to verify the procurement of any consultant or contractor. So those are examples of what could be considered a finding. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to scroll down. And on some occasions, we do have non-correctable findings. And this is when the grantee cannot go back in time and recreate a document to be in compliance with a program policy or federal regulation. An example of this could be not providing a property owner with the appropriate documentation before using federal funds to acquire their property. So for example, you have to provide a preliminary acquisition notice and a brochure when a public agency acquires your property. You can't go back in time and document that those have been provided after you have already purchased a private property with federal funds. Okay. A concern is typically when DHCD has a concern about a grantee's ability to achieve compliance or achieve benefit. Most often it's benefit. And some examples of concerns would be if at the interim compliance review or final compliance review, CDBG or ARC funds have not been spent in proportion with the match funds or leverage funds for the project, that would be a concern for us. Especially true if it's an ARC project where proportionality is very critical. Another concern would be if we are at the interim compliance review and there is a lack of progress on your project, that will be a concern for us. And right now, there's several projects that are in a space where there's various factors causing a lack of progress. And so if you have identified in your project early on a lack of progress, you need to let your CDS know as soon as possible so that they can work with you on ways to address the lack of progress and get the project moving forward again. Another concern is if the project has not met benefit by the time of the final compliance review. Those of you who are experienced managing CDBG and ARC projects will remember that we allow 2 years beyond the contract expiration date to achieve the proposed benefit. So it's sometimes that we will note that if you're really close to that benefit at the final compliance review, it's not likely that we will note it as a concern. But if construction's complete and the services have started and there's no documentation of benefit at the final compliance review, then that would be considered a concern. An unresolved issue is when a grantee might not have up-to-date files on certain things. And an example of this would be if the CDBG funds have not been appropriated for the current fiscal year at the time of the compliance review. However, it has been put on the agenda for the next Board of Supervisors or City Council meeting. So it's unresolved, it's in progress. There's no documentation at the compliance review, but it's going to happen. So we would note that as an unresolved issue. Another example of an unresolved issue would be if you have a register of assigned employees that has already been completed for your prime contractor, but someone for the contractor received a raise or they had a change in job classification. So that file had not been updated. So that would need to be updated. And a final example would be if the project management plan is not updated to reflect any changes in personnel or timeline. That would be an unresolved issue, and your CDS would request that you update those documents. So corrective actions for any of the findings, concerns, or unresolved issues would need to be addressed in writing within 30 days of the date of the letter of findings. And most often you will email those directly to your CDS, and all of the information will be outlined specifically in the attachment page to your letter of findings. Okay, next slide. So recommendations and reminders. As soon as you know when your compliance review is going to be, start setting up your files. And we offer a way to set up your files in the Grant Management Manual. You may follow that, or if it's more helpful for compliance purposes, you can set up your files based on the compliance document checklist, which outlines the specific documents for each checklist. For example, project management would have your project management plan, your timeline. Files and contracts would be set up to include all contracts that are funded in full or in part with CDBG, ARC, IRF. So you can do it that way. Please from the bottom of our hearts, we're asking that you scan files as single PDF documents. When all of the documents are scanned as one giant PDF, it is cumbersome to parse through them and separate them out so that we can attach them to the appropriate checklist. So please do scan those documents as single PDFs. And related to that, while you're scanning them, please save them and label them clearly so we will know which document we are reviewing and where it needs to go. And although we are reviewing documents virtually right now, we do expect that you maintain any appropriate document with original signatures. Yes, I see Amanda has her hand raised.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm just going to reiterate that and maybe not be quite as nice about it as you. So first off, we see all of our pre-contract items coming in as one document. Please don't do that. Again, use the process that Kathy has identified. Scan them in, upload them one at a time with an appropriately descriptive title. Do not call everything pre-contract documents. Now, and we get that it takes a minute longer for someone, for our grantees to do it that way, but we will ask that you consider our perspective. We have hundreds of projects in CAMS. And when we have to look at multiple projects and cannot find individual documents easily, some of us utter inappropriate words, you know. We might roll our eyes or something of that sort. And I know that nobody would want us to be compelled to do that. So please break it down on a document by document basis, regardless of what you're sending us, and title it appropriately. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. And Jessica, I see that your hand is raised.
So there was just a question about when a project has been delayed due to the availability of materials. Would the contractor have to provide the documentation proving the delayed materials?
I think it would be helpful if the contractor could provide an explanation. An email explanation, I think, would be sufficient for the delay in materials, specifically saying, this is what we're trying to order, and this is what we're being told, like how long it's going to take to get that information. Because right now, lots of projects, the supplies and materials are significantly delayed, and it's helpful for us to know what is being delayed and how long it's going to be delayed, because we can also share that information with our other grantees and project partners so that they are aware of that situation. Any other questions around the materials and supplies delay? And again, I encourage you to reach out to your CDS as soon as you know when there's going to be any type of delay on your project. Okay. I want to reiterate again to maintain those documents with original signatures. This is especially true for the Federal Labor Standards requirement. All payrolls have to be signed in blue or black ink by an authorized signatory. So while you are able to send us the payrolls virtually as PDFs, we have to confirm that you do have the original signatures in your files. So please do that. Meet deadlines. That is another recommendation and reminder. Your CDS will communicate those deadlines to you, and please don't assume that because it's a virtual compliance review that you can be like, oh, well, it's day of, I'll send this today. Please don't. Please respect the deadlines, meet the deadlines. It won't work more efficiently for all parties involved if we respect the deadlines. And last but not least, you can tell it's a recurring theme throughout all of the compliance review. Follow the guidance that you receive from your CDS. Each CDS has a little bit of flexibility, some maximum feasible deference, if you will, for those CDBG folks, on how we work with you on our virtual compliance reviews. So please follow the guidance that they provide. Okay, next slide. And if after you leave today, you have a question about the virtual compliance review process, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm available by email and phone, and the office number that I have is also one that you can text. So if you're uncomfortable having a phone call, you're welcome to text. Deanna, I see your question about links to cloud files for compliance reviews. If your CDS will allow for that, that is acceptable. As long as they can review that information and download it to their files, that would be an acceptable way, but confirm with your CDS. I see Amanda's hand.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. A couple more things. One is you referenced the filing system that's outlined in the manual and suggested that people use that to help them prepare for monitoring events. I would add to that we recommend actually that they start using it at the outset of the project so that they'll have a way to organize their documents, whether you use paper files or digital files. Having a system to use from the get-go makes life easier for everybody throughout the project, and particularly at monitoring events. I also want to note that, you know, it has happened that specialists have begun the conduct of a monitoring or compliance event and realized, unfortunately, that in fact the grantee had not put the time in to prepare for maximizing the ease of seeing the event through. Now, you know, when we were doing these things in person, it would blow my mind that people did not take the time to prepare, because it meant that what could have been done in one day now took 2 or 3 days. And having been on the other side briefly, but on the other side in the grantee shoes occasionally, our perspective is that you really want us in your files as little as possible. You know, you have other work to do. So the sooner we start and finish, the better life will be for everyone. And in fact, there is a point at which, if files are not ready for us to review and handle, the CD specialist may essentially walk away and say, I'll reschedule this again in 2 weeks. We'll get it done then. But right now you're not ready for this. And that will be part of the review letter that goes to the chief executive. So, you know, I know that everybody tries to make this as doable and lighthearted as possible. It is very doable. It's not hard. It is very detail oriented, but we don't have the capacity. If you have not done your prep, we can't do it for you. So just be mindful of that, and we will have great compliance reviews.
Thanks, Amanda. And I see that Victoria has a question in the chat about compliance reviews. If they're annual, we typically schedule the first interim compliance review within 12 to 14 months of getting under contract with DHCD. Depending on the length of the project, we typically only do an interim compliance review and a final compliance review. And the final compliance review takes place about 85% of CDBG funds or ARC funds expended. However, if a project takes longer than the typical 2-year contract period, if we've approved any extensions, it is possible that we will do more than one interim compliance review. Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, thanks for the reminder, Elizabeth. If you have any questions or concerns about your compliance review, please contact your CDS before they start the compliance review. All right, thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate that. And as a reminder, of course, this afternoon, I don't have an exact time. All of the PowerPoint presentations that you've seen today will be loaded onto our webpage, in addition to all of the handouts. So with Kathy's, you will get the compliance checklist. It's 7 pages. I scrolled through it very quickly so you could just see what we're talking about. That will also be there as well. Can someone drop the web link page in to this chat? That way it's in multiple chats. And again, all of these sessions are being recorded separately. So, thank you, Jessica. All of the sessions are being recorded separately so that you all can go in once they are uploaded. We will actually let folks know once they're uploaded, because it may be a week or two before the recordings get loaded onto the web page. But we will definitely send out information on that once we get a nod from our marketing department. I am going to turn this over to Amanda to do a wrap up for the first day. And again, I want to thank everyone for participating. Amanda?
Thanks, Sherry. So before I start the wrap up, I want to say to the PAAO team that if you can hang back and have a brief chat after our grantees have gotten off the event, that would be great. So let's see, Erlene has asked if the training is scheduled to go until 3:30 tomorrow afternoon.
So it is and it isn't. Our grant management workshop is from 9 to 1 tomorrow. And then from 2 to 3:30, we are doing a CAMS training. Our CAMS team at DHCD has been hard at work updating the user guide into a much more friendly user guide and not legal and computer ease. So we hope that you all can join us. But yes, there is a break. We know everyone would be famished and hangry at us. So there is a break from 1 to 2. And if you can join us, it is a beginner information for CAMS. It is an intermediate information for CAMS. And we will be going over the new user guide.
Great. Thanks for that explanation, Sherry. So I just wanted to touch base and ask what you thought of this format, because doing this from 9 to 1 several days in a row is a different kind of a thing for us. Whether we should think about repeating this kind of format in the future. But then also, what have you heard today that surprised you or excited you or alarmed you? I'm going to just pick on somebody randomly to give some feedback. Abbott.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate that. How did I know you were going to pick on me?
Because it's happened before, is my guess.
It has happened before. That's okay. No, I mean, I think to your question about this ending around 1 o'clock or so, that's great. You know, in this new virtual Zoom world that we live in, I think everyone's juggling multiple Zoom meetings and trying to squeeze this all in together. One of the beauties of when we do meet in person is it kind of forces us to clear our calendar. But when we're in the office, you can tell people I have meetings, but it doesn't matter. You know, I still get pulled into things. So it makes it easier for me to attend this. So I appreciate that. But no, I think the Zoom works well. I'm old school. I miss in person. I like in person. You know, I do see the beauty of it. It does make it easier to get to, you know, my 2 o'clock meeting I'll be able to make and eat lunch. So that's a great thing. So all in all, I appreciate it.
Okay. Somebody else share your perspective on this scheduling and on what you've heard today. Yep, I see that, Nikki. Folks are bailing out for lunch. Ellen, we miss doing this in person.
I will say, this is Joan Pearman. The fact that the environmental review has to be updated annually is something we probably have not been enforcing. And so do take heart to everything you learned today, because when we ask for something that we haven't been asking for in the past, it shouldn't be top secret, because you learned it today and it is in our manual. The reevaluation, the annual reevaluation, whether your scope has changed or not, is a simple checkbox and sign at the bottom. It's a one pager. So, keep those kinds of things in mind. We have to sharpen up our game from time to time as well. We admit that we're not perfect, damn near perfect, but not perfect.
Anybody else want to share anything that surprised or relieved or alarmed you today? Kenny Rogers?
I actually left for a break, but I am back now.
Just in time for us to end.
So it seems. Oh, I like the format. I like this because, for us in Southwest Virginia, it's always a 3 or 4 hour trip to go to Richmond or any place. So we don't have that 3 or 4 hours of trip. Interstate 81 is always blocked up with cars and stuff. We don't have to get on 81. I like it. I hope we continue to do this, and perhaps we can get to the point where it can be in both things, in person and virtual. So those that don't have to travel don't have to. And
sure,
I like it.
Okay. So we are going to have a couple more days together. I do want to go back to one point from earlier. Someone asked about the requirement that a locality own property that we invest in. I think this was during the planning grant presentation. And there are situations in which we do require local ownership, grantee ownership of property. But I wanted to be clear that on our downtown revitalization projects, we can use CDBG funds to invest in facades of buildings that are privately owned. There is paperwork that needs to go along with that. The planning grant can be used in part to develop that paperwork that will guide and monitor those relationships. But we do assume that part of downtown facade projects will include putting CDBG funds into privately owned facades. So feel free to talk with your specialist about that or bring other questions forward. But I just wanted to be clear about that before everybody slipped away today. I think this has been extraordinarily productive. Everybody's attention and focus has enabled us to end a little bit early. Sherry, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap us up, and then PAAO team, I'll see you in just a moment as we'll hold back to chat.